Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of The Journey, where we speak to our favorite celebrities and talk to them about their self love struggles, their self love journey. That will help inspire us and really tell us that despite the fact that we may see perfect lives that are curated and all of that, sometimes nothing could be further from the truth. So I think today's episode is going to be really inspiring for two reasons. One, the guest that we have today with us is someone who has been a fierce advocate of mental health. He's been talking about trauma, healing, and normalizing having mental health issues. So that's going to be a really insightful discussion. And secondly, because of the fact that today's episode is going to touch upon healing and trauma and mental health and doing the internal work that is required to begin your self-love journey. So without further ado, let us have our today's guest with us. Okay, there we go. Hello, Adnan.
Hi. Hey, Arfa. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, good, good. It's good to be here. Thank you for being persistent and, uh, getting me to do this. Always happy to do it. It's just been a bit of a difficult few weeks. I have a family member who's unwell, unfortunately, fourth stage cancer, and it's just been a lot of care, and it's just been a bit tough, but happy to be here.
And I'm so grateful that you took the time out for us and made this happen despite everything that's been happening. Really appreciative. Before we begin, I want to give a little bit of an introduction, although I think most of the people who are tuned in don't really need an introduction. They know you already, they know the work you do. But we do have a little bit of an international audience. We have people joining us from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt. So for them, I want to let them know that Adnan is an actor, one of the best actors in Pakistan that we have. He's also a producer. He's done some directorial work. But more than any of that, I think what makes Adnan so special and so wonderful, the fact that he's disappearing from the screen. Just kidding. What makes
I
him really
can't, I'm not
special
good with compliments.
what makes Adnan really special is the fact that he is using his platform actively to generate extremely important discussions about mental health, healing, trauma. And I don't mean just like an Instagram post here or an Instagram post there. I mean actually doing the work. So Adnan, for all the more reasons, thank you for being with us on the journey. Let's dive right into it.
Oh, I hate the lighting. I'm just trying to fix the lighting. That's why I keep flicking in and out. But anyways, thank you
I
for
think
having
you're
me.
being too self-critical, Adnan. I think the
You want to
lighting is
start? You
fine.
want to start with that?
No, I don't want to start with that. I want to start with what self-love means to you.
Gosh, Arfa, I don't know how to answer that as like, it seems like an essay question. I feel like if we had a conversation around it, maybe I could get into it. But
Sorry.
I can kind of just start speaking and then see what kind of maybe you can grab something out of it. But I don't know. I think self-love is kind of this idea of, I guess what really resonated with me was this idea that we need to take care of ourselves and prioritize ourselves over everything else without it being selfish. I think our tool in this world are our bodies and our mind and who we are and our spirit and whatever we have. And I think most people, a lot of people are not so connected to themselves. A lot of people end up either prioritizing other people or there's some kind of self-loathing when it comes to yourself. And we're programmed or brought up in a way to not truly honor our own needs. In fact, we're kind of taught to focus on our wants, not as much as our needs. And I think self-love is really about seeing what you need and figuring out what works for you.
Yeah.
So I think it's that journey about like really figuring out what are like Adnan's needs and how can I honor those needs? Because if I can't be kind to myself, then I will never be happy in any relationship with anyone, whether it's a partner or a parent. So for me, that's what pretty much a little bit about what the journey's been about.
And then something you said right in the beginning really set off a question in my head. So many people say that self-love is selfish, but like you said, you're we can see that you're quite self-critical, and I think that is an important element of improving yourself. So when people say self-love is about being arrogant, I think they don't understand, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. Self-love sometimes can be all about looking inwards and changing yourself. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think, people get a lot of that flack because at least in South Asian societies, there's a real focus के हमें सिर्फ माँ बाप की कदर करनी चाहिए और बड़े भाई की कदर करनी चाहिए और फिर उसके बाद अपनी बीवी या हस्बैंड की कदर करनी चाहिए और ऑफ कोर्स दैट्स अ वंडरफुल क्वालिटी और करनी चाहिए लेकिन जब आप अपनी कदर नहीं करेंगे तो आप किसी और की भी नहीं कर पाएंगे और क्या होता है we're told we're kind of trained in a way to kind of let ourselves be compromised in a lot of ways, and that's what
Yeah.
leads to passive aggressive behavior, or it leads to, just people. It can lead to depression. It can lead to a lot of things. So I think it isn't vanity. In fact, I remember when I first sat down with my therapist, and she would ask me questions about this, and I'd be like, oh, but I'm being selfish, and she's like, well, what does this word selfish mean to you? Because unless you start taking care of yourself first, you really can't be of any benefit to someone else. So I don't think it's vanity. I think vanity actually comes from insecurity. So I'm also someone who's been vain in the past, and in that, I think a little bit of vanity is connected to self-love. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, in the sense of looking in the mirror and not looking at your faults, but looking at, God's blessings, if you will, or whatever you connect to. You can, we are all creations of something else. But I think that idea that when we get too obsessed with ourselves, we're kind of more obsessed with our faults. And because we're obsessed with our faults, we kind of overcompensate by being vain. But I think the older you get, the more you realize that vanity is just a ruse. It's just a cover for deep insecurity.
Adnan, you said in a live session with Dr. Radar, I tuned in the other day and I found that session, by the way, to be extremely helpful, very inspiring. So thank you for doing that. You said that when you were in the US, your time there, she really shook the Pakistani man out of you. And that's where your self-love journey began. So I want to ask you a little bit about, firstly, what does that statement mean, shaking the Pakistani man out of you? And secondly, what was your aha moment where you're like, okay, this is where my self-love journey has begun?
Oh, I know you're quoting me from something. I remember was saying that and kind of cringing when I said that. Are people having a tough time listening, by the way? I still feel I'm seeing these like poor connection things. Can we have a thumbs up if you guys can hear me?
Man, I
Can you
don't know
guys
why.
hear me? I can try connecting to my Wi-Fi again, but if you guys can hear, can you just give a thumbs up or just a recognition that you're hearing? You can hear me, right, Arfa?
I can hear you perfectly fine. There's no connection
Okay.
issue.
Okay, great. So, Elodie, that's lovely. Hi. Um, so Sam is an amazing being, and thank you for tuning into that. And she basically, I grew up in Pakistan, I grew up in Islamabad, but I did grow up a bit of a, what we call here a burger. My first language was English. I went to the American school. I am a rarity and an anomaly. Pehle mera mazak udate the, but now I own it. That's what the truth was. I went to
Burger
the American
Bacha.
school in Islam. So I went to the American school in Islamabad. My first language was English. It's something to be proud of that in your own country, people can learn other languages also, and they don't, Urdu doesn't have to be your first language. Anyways, but having grown up in Islamabad, I just kind of, had a somewhat protected lifestyle, even though my parents were super cool and my mom was, a working mother and all. I think I just growing up in this society, I was kind of just maybe not so, even being a sensitive person, I wasn't connected to my emotions as much, or I didn't feel safe being emotional. And I think what Sam really did as a friend was she just allowed me to feel safe. So I felt like I was given permission in a way to be sensitive, to be aware. And in fact, I was almost honored by her. Like she honored her and her group of friends, really like honored who I was as a person, not who I was pretending to be. I think being a guy in Pakistan, especially when you're a teenager, a lot of it is about show and macho and padda and, that chick and like trying to be cool
Yeah.
and like just like, just like change your voice. And I think with her, she was just like, you're a beautiful man the way you are. And that was really amazing for someone to be able to break those barriers and kind of, make me feel secure. So that's what I mean. I just wasn't self-conscious anymore in the same way as how am I looking? How's my hair looking? Or like always fishing for compliments, that kind of stuff, which I think is
Yeah.
a bit Pakistani.
So would you say there was one specific moment or incident that happened that led you to that, or it was like a journey, like a realization over time that, you know, you are okay the way that you are?
Oh, Arfa, I mean, it's a journey, right? And I think no one is okay with the way they are. We're just brought up that way because we're brought up by our parents and by society by the carrot and stick, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we are only given love often when we respond to certain ways which affirm what our parents or society wants us to be. And so I
Yeah.
think it's very difficult to be in a space until you are ready. And actually, that's where self-love comes in. Coming to your first question, I think the realization of self-love is when you're like, okay, I'm going to give myself permission. I don't, मुझे किसी और की permission नहीं चाहिए. I don't. I will have to take care of myself. I will represent myself. And you know, and it doesn't have to be done in an angry way. You do it in a loving way and in a peaceful way. You're just like, I will take care of myself. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm bad at. I'm working on it, and you keep a positive outlook. So yeah, I don't know
A
if I'm
lot of
answering your
people are
questions.
a lot of people are mentioning Satke Tamare, and I was actually going to come to that because you said something so beautiful that really moved me to tears. And every time I think about it, it just kind of, you know, it moves me. It's like you said that we hum na perform karte hain for love. We've always been performing for validation, for acceptance, and that's a part of you like always continues to do that and not really accept who you are. Really, you know, because we think कि जो हम असल में हैं, that will not be accepted, that will not be loved and cared for. So, talk a little bit about the performative side of love versus the authentic side that we're afraid to bring out.
Okay, but before that, I'm going to try to put on the.
Okay, now we're having connection issues.
Hi, how's this? No, no. How's this?
This is good.
I'm, I'm not. I'm present. I'm whole. Am I
Yes, you're
whole and
you're
present? Those two very important things. Okay, sorry. I'm just trying to make this also recordable for you. I know it's important for you, so
Don't
I'm
worry
getting
about it.
some. Yeah.
Also, I
Um,
just want to put out, sorry, before you answer, I just want to say a quick thing to the people who are watching. This is going to be uploaded on Hey Arfa. So I've pinned a comment there if you can still see it. I'm not sure if you can, but it will be uploaded. So in case you missed something here, you go back and refer to it on Hey underscore Arfa. Don't worry about that.
Okay,
Yes,
cool. I
continue.
hope you guys can hear us, and if you can't, keep telling us so that I can keep switching. You are a little broken, Arfa. You come in and like, I'm just wondering if your Wi-Fi situation is okay.
You know, the problem is I have to turn on a certain software to be able to use this in the country. So maybe that's causing glitches.
Oh, that's probably might be it because I've tried on
Maybe.
both my 4G and my.
I'm
Uh,
sorry. I mean, so far we've had no issues with the connection. I'm not seeing anything on my end, but maybe it's not coming
I'm
across.
having issues on your end.
I don't know how I can fix it because
Leave it on 4G. Acha, so you were asking about Satya Tamare and performing for love.
actually I was asking about performing for love, but the reason I connected it to Satke Tumare is because you opened up about your struggles with anxiety while filming for Satke Tumare. That's when you really realized that you have a problem with anxiety. So therefore the connection.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big, deep question. So, do you want to refine the question? Like, I think the Satya Tumare anxiety performance question is a very big one. Is there like a?
Let's break it down to two: performing for love, and
Hmm.
then we'll go to Satke Tumare and
So, I
anxiety.
think, I realized retroactively, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, coming out of Satya, ke acting is tough, man. Like, acting is really tough. And it's tough because for me, because I don't know. I dive into it kind of like a method actor where I haven't really learned the craft. So what I have as an actor, I think, is EQ or empathy, and I'm able to channel what I've observed in the world and maybe bring it to a character. So I study characters really deeply. I go and I do research and I make notes and I have backstory and I think of what their parents were like and I think of what their childhood was like. I really develop roles like that. I don't have the craft, so I'm not someone who's very knows how to throw my voice or knows how to hit the marks because I've studied very little acting. So for me, I realized, okay, when I for Satya Tumare, I had to really seek. He's very angry. Khalil Saab is angry. if you've watched it and you know Khalil
Yeah.
Saab.
Mm-hmm.
So he's an angry guy, and I had to find all that anger. And for me to find that anger, I had to dive in to personal experiences because actually I wasn't in touch with my anger at that point. I'd never had anger. I've always been someone who's been kind of like looking at, I would never, I guess I suppressed my anger and I just chose that I will get the love I want if I behave a certain way. So, then I realized at some point, I think at age 12 or 13, that I will just choose a certain way of life and I will get the sneakers I want and I'll get the food, my pocket money I want from my parents and I'll get the grades. And then I realized, okay, I can do everything that's required of me to behave a
Yeah.
certain way. But I think when I had to go in Satke Tumhare and look back and try to be angry, I kind of triggered something in my childhood. And that really, I think I triggered, like it was like putting my fingers into a hornet's nest of my
Mm.
own kind of doing. And like it just opened up this whole well of emotion that I had repressed for maybe 20 years. And then I had to work through that. And I realized, so sorry to go back to your question, is that I realized that I was always kind of performing for love and affirmation, and I kind of got used to it. Though a part of me always felt a little sad and unfulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, Satke really helped me reconcile that and realize that I was faking it a bit, and I didn't want to fake it anymore after that.
And then your actors are really missing you on screen. I think they don't see enough of you, and they really do connect with you on the platform that you have, but they do want to see you more on screen. And I know this question you've said in the past is a little bit overwhelming for you because it does put a certain pressure on you, and it might not necessarily align with your current goals. But are we going to see more of you, or are you focusing more on kind of this side of things, wellness, mental health?
I think currently I've done a little small part in Asim Abbasi's Churails, and that'll come out at some point on a streaming
Yeah.
network. And that's a great thing. And I wanted to be a part of it because it's such a strong piece of work. And when it comes out, you'll see why. But it's just like, you think Aurat March was something. Wait till you see this. But besides that, I think I'm just not in the game. So I appreciate people who like me. Waqai, matlab, I get a lot of love for the little bit of work that I've done. But masla ye hai ki people aren't hiring me either, right? It's a business. And I think in a business, you have to stay present. And, I'm not in the acting game. So people aren't necessarily giving me offers because I'm not showing up and saying, I want to act. I mean, I'm saying that if you want me to be in something and you think that the role is right, I'd be happy to do it. But most people are like, okay, iske baad ye karna, uske baad wo karna, acha wo us drama se isme aa jayega. So I'm not, I never wanted to be in the business of acting. And so if something comes up, I'll definitely do it. If someone wants me to be in I'll do it if the role works for me. But I'm not in that game. I did Dil Banjara and it kind of turned me off the whole business. I was just like, I can't put my body and my face in front of something I don't believe in.
I mad respect you for that.
Yeah. I mean, I make ads. It's not like I haven't signed a deal with the devil, I mean, I think in modern capitalism and these societies, हमें करना पड़ता है, हमें सब लोगों ने पैसे कमाने हैं और सब लोग मतलब आर्ट को pursue नहीं कर सकते. But मेरे लिए ये था कि चलो, I just didn't want to put myself, because acting is your voice and it's your body, right?
Yeah.
And it's your soul and it's your essence. So I just realized that I don't want to put that out there if it's not fairly representing who I am, because people recognize you for what you've done. So I direct stuff, and sometimes the stuff I direct isn't 100%, my heart isn't into it, but it's okay because I can be invisible and I love the craft of filmmaking.
And then something you just said, I was going to ask you about that a little later on in the session, but I think आपने जो ये बात कही कि हर कोई नहीं afford कर सकता कि सिर्फ art के लिए काम करे. So do you think self-love is a very privileged space? The fact that we can consider this कि रोटी कपड़ा मकान को छोड़ो लेकिन self-love की बात करो. Some people would say that. That's a criticism for them. How would you respond to that?
So what is the question? What's the question?
The question is, do you think self-love is a privileged space? That people, the common man in Pakistan, उसके पास time नहीं है इस चीज के बारे में सोचने के लिए.
नहीं, I think therapy के लिए लोगों को issues है, and I think mental health awareness is something that cuts through every sort of class and I mean, right now the people who are suffering the most in these COVID times are daily wage workers, right? People who can't make their ends meet, and they're suffering, and they're suffering in many ways, but yeah, they can't necessarily address it in the way that people who are wealthy can, because they don't like Pakistan में healthcare तो वैसे ही इतना बुरा है, but उसके अलावा if you do want to approach it, it seems like a luxury. But self love, I think नहीं, आई थिंक सेल्फ लव तो सबसे जरूरी चीज है. आई थिंक हमारे मुआशरे में, हमारे सोसाइटी में इतनी नेगेटिविटी है, तो वो सेल्फ लव ना होने से ही तो है ना. जब आप यहाँ से वहां, मतलब sorry, my cat is going absolutely crazy. She's like jumping all over stuff. So
उसको
I'm
भी
just
लिया
kind of like,
उसको भी
oh,
लिया
पता नहीं, she's like, I think things are being thrown all around over there. So one eye is there. I think self love, देखिए हमारे मुआशरे में वैसे ही इतने मसले हैं, वैसे ही मतलब पाकिस्तान में मैं कहता हूँ ऊपर शलवार पुलिंग डाउन फिनोमेनॉन है कि कोई ऊपर ना बढ़े, हम उनकी शलवार नीचे कर देंगे. बट आई थिंक इट्स, वो केकड़े नहीं होते हैं. इफ यू एक्चुअली, सॉरी, अगर आप केकड़ों को देखें, इफ यू सी crabs in a basket, as one tries to get up, the other will pull it down. So they actually can never leave the pot. You can leave a bunch of crabs just lying in a pot and they'll never escape because the other one will always bring it down. And unfortunately, I do see that a lot happening in Pakistan. It's not, it's not everybody and it's not everything, but generally, and so I think that's a self-love issue. And I think it's when you start hating on others, it's actually you are not connected to yourself. When I see people who get angry and kind of batmeez, they're not upset at the other person. They're actually upset at themselves, but they don't have the capacity, and actually they don't have the courage to see that in themselves, because I think वो जो हम दूसरे लोगों में चीजें हमें तंग करती हैं, वो हमारे अंदर हमें तंग करती हैं. तो I think that is the basis of anger. तो self love बहुत जरूरी है.
बहुत ज्यादा. एंड आई थिंक ये भी है ना कि एक टॉक्सिक वैल्यूज कॉन्स्टेंटली रीइंफोर्स हो जा रही हैं क्योंकि वो कल्चर ही नहीं चेंज हो रहा, वो माइंडसेट ही नहीं चेंज किया जा रहा कि आपने अपने आप से मोहब्बत करनी है, क्योंकि हम तो उसको ऑटोमेटिकली सेल्फिश करार दे देते हैं, व्हिच इट्स नॉट सेल्फिश, इट्स समथिंग दैट यू वर्किंग ऑन टू बी better productive human beings for the society. मतलब I always say this कि how can you give from an empty well? जब आपके अंदर ही कोई मोहब्बत अपने लिए नहीं होगी तो फिर दूसरों के अंदर भी आपको सिर्फ नफरत ही नजर आएगी.
बिल्कुल सही कहा. I think that's the problem with most relationships, and most marriages. And I think, unfortunately, we see it a lot. I'm not saying solely, but I think it is definitely a bit of a male problem also. I think, where we as men we're just like generally not happy with most things, and we sit and complain, and we've been encouraged from a young age to complain. But the hypocrisy also comes with us कि हम complain भी करते हैं, लेकिन हम अपने फायदे में जो चीज देखते हैं हम उसके पीछे भी जाते हैं, तो फिर हम hypocrites हो जाते हैं. फिर हम hypocrites होते हैं तो फिर हम अल्लाह मियाँ से माफी मांगते हैं. तो ये एक टॉक्सिक सर्कल एक बन गया. एटलीस्ट आई कैन स्पीक फॉर मैन. मैं औरतों के बारे में नहीं बात करूंगा, बिकॉज maybe you can speak on that.
Thank you.
No, I mean, I just being an ally, but I just think at least for men, it's like it's such a toxic cycle. And I think सबसे पहली चीज ये होती है कि आजकल like I said, there's family illness, there's cancer in the family, and when there's some problem, जब भी अगर पैसों के मसले हो, health के मसले हो, relation के मसले हो, patience बड़ा try होता है. You really have to find patience. और सब्र मेरे अंदर भी इतना नहीं था, लेकिन it's something I've been working on, because I'm like जब मेरे लिए दूसरों के लिए मतलब let's say कि मेरे पास सब्र नहीं है जब दूसरे लोगों पे आता है या कोई रिलेशनशिप्स पे आते हैं, क्योंकि I don't have patience with myself. मतलब अपने आप से सब्र नहीं है. तो again, when they talk,
yeah,
sorry, I want to say something, because a lot of people in Pakistan look at things from the Islamic prism. And I think, when they talk about the Bada Jihad and the Chota Jihad, the Bada Jihad, they say traditionally is the Jihad, which is the inner battle. Usko thoda sa padhe, exactly, that's the Jihad that actually people need to fight. वो यही कहते हैं, मतलब इस्लाम में भी है कि वो बड़ी, that is the big Jihad. बाहर वाला Jihad is the छोटा Jihad. So actually आप उस पे फोकस करें, अपने अमल, अपने तरीके, and that's self-love. Just अपने आप को bringing yourself to a higher version of yourself. And that is, in essence, in all religious traditions, that is being closer to God. Being a better version of yourself is a closer connection to the idea of God. And so that is self-love.
Absolutely.
आप खुदा से प्यार नहीं कर सकते जब आप अपने आप से नहीं प्यार कर सकते. सीधी सी बात है, if you want to go through the Islamic prism.
No, absolutely. And Adnan, I love the way that you've been answering the questions so far, because I think it blends in very nicely with the questions that I have set for you as well. So I was going to ask you, कि we can see, like you said, it's been a journey for you to change yourself. You were not always this way. You're still not very patient with yourself. तो सारे हर चीज इंटरकनेक्टेड होती है, मतलब ये एक पूरी जर्नी है. How can you learn to, okay, so no, I'm going to phrase this question better. How can you decide that it's okay for you to be who you are? क्योंकि जब हम खुद को एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर पाते तो हम दूसरों के साथ भी ऑथेंटिक नहीं होते. So how can you really be okay with yourself, and how can you have then that self-worth?
I mean, I don't know. I wish I had all the answers.
But you
Are
do,
you asking
because,
for? Are you
but
asking
you
for
do because you're
tools?
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, but I feel like you would have the answer because this is something that you have been working on yourself. Like, Adnan Malik was not always Adnan Malik that we know now. Adnan Malik was a different person. Adnan Malik
That's
as a
true.
teenager would have all those toxic traits, but then Adnan Malik chose to work on himself and identify the toxic behavior patterns that he had and then turn them.
Sure. I think Adnan Malik, even as a teenager, was a sweet guy. I think my essence has always been, I've always been kind of gentle, and I think, I've never. I just think, my vices are. I mean, they're often just inflicted on myself more than anyone else. Like, I was never one to really, like, if I saw something that was unfair or someone was bullying someone, I would try not to do it. I mean, of course, as teenagers, ho jata hai, and I definitely participated here and there, but I was more on the receiving end of things like that, even being one of the cool kids, you know. So I think, my journey has been one about kindness to myself. But I guess I don't know. I mean, are we talking about like tools that I've employed over the years, or because it's not a, अगर मतलब ये तो लोग किताबें लिखते हैं तो पूरा एक subject matter है ना कि मतलब self
इसलिए
love
तो
or
open-ended questions है,
wellness.
whatever.
So okay, so for me, I think I was just never like I was never really deeply happy in my relationships, right? And I had to really figure that out, and I think that was a big part of it because I was also numb to myself. So we have numbing practices. I mean, some people smoke, some people drink, some people are distracting themselves in other ways. People have, we're on a forum, so whatever. People have their own like sexual like preconceptions and ideas. Like people distract themselves and numb themselves in a multiple different ways. एक तो उसमें कोई shame नहीं होनी चाहिए. I think we're a society where we don't talk about everything. So I think what एक तो हम एक numbing practice होता है, and we adopt those practices, those coping styles, as Dr. Sam Rader was saying, are things that we've adopted over the years. So then what happens is those things serve a purpose during a certain period of time. लेकिन क्योंकि हमारा जो ego है, that often its job is to basically make you do something that you've already done because it's safe, because you've already done it, even if it's not necessarily a good thing. We want those feelings of safety. So when we've done something, let's say during our teenage years, then we keep doing those things into our 20s and 30s, and then you one day realize कि यार ये जो मैं चीजें करता हूँ इनका फायदा क्या है? अब क्या फायदा है? चलो शायद एक वक्त पे इनका कोई फायदा था भी. So I think what I really did was I kind of reevaluated all my habits, everything, Even like I used to bite my nails like up until last year, and I would do it secretly. Like I just, to the point where I was doing it, no, but I wouldn't even know I was doing it. Like, because when I would zone out, not be present, I would just start doing this and like just like spit it out or like chew it. And then I'd come back, like I was hypnotized in another world. And then I didn't even like consider it until recently. I was like, yeah, this is, why do I do this? And then I realized it's because I'm zoning out all the time. And then I realized actually that's the problem. If you really look at wellness practitioners now, and they're all connected to wellness and spiritual traditions, right? So अगर आप किसी को भी देखें, I follow so many people, the main thing is presence, right? Being present, being in this moment. And I think I realized that my head was 70 to 80% in a day in the past. I was just going through like reworking relationships, being 13 and being in a bedroom and being 11 and playing cricket and being 17. And these weren't even traumatic places I was in. They were just places connected to the past. I was obviously looking for something. I have been. But, I realized at some point actually that wasn't helping me because I was spending so much time just not being here. And then when I think about the future, I get anxiety. So, as they say, कि जब आप past में गुम हो जाते हैं अपने माजी में, तो आप डिप्रेस, दैट्स काइंड ऑफ डिप्रेशन, इट्स सैडनेस। और जब आप मुस्तकबिल के बारे में सोचते हैं तो एंजाइटी होती है, बिकॉज आपको डर होता है कि आपको पता नहीं आप कहाँ जा रहे हैं। तो
जी.
आप you have to be between the two and actually find presence. So all my practices and tools mostly revolve around being as present as possible. So I find myself zoning out when I'm eating, or even if I'm talking to you, if I'm not really present here, I'm like looking at other things, or you know I think most young people spend their days not present, especially if they're living with their parents or they're living in an unhappy partnership. They're not present, and then their partner feels that they're not present. And so I think what really needs to happen is we need to increase our practices of being present in this moment. And I think that is the big game changer.
So Adnan, you've mentioned in a couple of your interviews that you have this. Okay, I'm going to ask you about your self-care routine, but I also want to ask you, because we're talking a lot about being in the present moment. I know you said that there's namaz, a combination of yoga and meditation that you do. Tell us a little bit about that.
So listen, nobody's perfect. I'm just, I mean, I think being human is being imperfect, right? And it's actually, that's the essential essence of it. And when they talk about the devils and the angels, and you talk about the good and the bad, it's true. It's all true. Like, Islam has some great wisdom in it, as do all the other religions. When they're practiced at their core, the point is to, it's a codified form of wellness practices. So for me, I've taken from few different places. My namaz practice is kind of like gratitude. Sorry, my namaz has a gratitude practice in it. जिसका मतलब है कि नमाज के बाद I say जो मेरी दुआएं हैं, I'm always being grateful for what I have, and I think that's a really positive thing. So I think you need that. And namaz is something I've come to late in life. पहले तो इतना नहीं पढ़ता था, अब्बू के साथ जुम्मे पे जाता था. Now I have my own kind of practice, and I enjoy it, and I feel it. It's also meditation. I mean, if you do yoga and you've done qigong, namaz is the same basis. Because actually, when this is your third eye in yoga, and you're putting it down, you're opening up your heart chakra when you're saying your dua. Like, it's all connected. And anyone who says it isn't, you need to do your research. Because I think, I think the beauty and the greatness of Islam was that it took the best of what already existed. So it's not like these things were invented out of the blue. These were practices that, people saw and incorporated. So for me, that happens. Then, of course, yoga is wonderful because it does all of that as well. And it also helps me increase my heart rate, keeps me fit. And I love it. I mean, your body is capable of doing so many interesting things. It's kind of amazing. And then I have quite a few. What else do I have? You seem to know.
Self-care practices. I mean, do you have any of those stereotypical ones like candles and spa days and things like that? Something like
I mean, you just have to enjoy everything you do. So for me, like, exercise is really important, and nature time. Like, I think exercise, so important. Just every day do something where get my body moving, where I'm sweating. It also helps my mind, it helps my body, it helps my spirit. Nature, I live in Karachi, not a lot of it, but when I go to Islamabad, I'm just out half my day, and I want to spend more time in nature. Actually, they say if you really want to heal yourself, pay attention to the pace of nature. That nature, like, I remember, I'm always like, ye jaldi kyun nahi hota hai, isko kare. And then, like, there was an आंधी आई, एक पौधा था, उसका पत्ता टूट गया. अब उस नए पत्ते को उगने में वक्त लगता है भाई, और सूरज लगता है, और पानी लगता है, और उसकी नरिशिंग होती है, फिर वो पत्ता आके ऐसे बढ़ता है और अपनी खूबसूरती दिखाता है. या एक फूल, हम जो है ना, हम नहीं, फॉरेन चाहिए, फॉरेन चीजें सही होनी चाहिए. तो when I realize, when I'm in nature and I pay attention to the birds and I'm paying attention to the ants and I'm looking at the wind blowing and I'm just noticing a plant, I'm like, oh, this is Allah Miyan ka nizam, or this is the greater kind of structure, and we must work at this pace. So, and that actually really calms down people's anxieties. नियत बनाए एक तरफ, और रोज एक छोटा कदम लें, छोटा सा रोज. और रोज नहीं ले सकते तो एटलीस्ट अवेयरनेस रोज होनी चाहिए कि यार आज नहीं किया, लेकिन अपने आप को ज्यादा डांटें भी मत. मतलब I tell my father this a lot. My father is mashallah in his late 80s, and he's a man who's you know, he had polio when he was a child in his shoulder. He had a stuttering problem, and he kind of overcame these things, you know. And he's really like, mashallah, lived a very good life for himself, and he, you know, a top doctor in Pakistan and whatnot. And now he gets hard on himself when he feels like he can't do something. And I'm like, Abu, this is not going to help. This is not. आप अपने आप को डांट एक वक्त पे शायद फायदा था आपको एक उम्र पे लेकिन अब आपको ज्यादा डैमेज कर रहा है find another way you know be kinder with yourself so I think that I guess this whole thing is about self-love because I think we keep rotating
No,
around
no,
it.
definitely, because the questions are centered around self-love. So, you know, the whole point of this interview, the whole point of this series is to show people that self-love looks different for everybody. You know, and I was just gonna say that I'm so glad that a lot of your answers revolve around doing the internal work. या अंदर से अपने आप पे जो काम करने वाली चीजें हैं वो actually self-love है. Because no amount, people really need to understand this. No amount of manicures, no amount of spa days is going to fix that inner relationship that you have with yourself. क्योंकि अंदर जो काम करना है ना वो बहुत जरूरी है.
बिल्कुल और एक्चुअली ये मसला एक सोसाइटी भी है और अनफॉर्चुनेटली मॉडर्न कैपिटलिज्म भी है कि वो स्पिरिचुअलिटी को बिल्कुल डेड कर दिया इवन मॉडर्न रिलीजन प्रैक्टिस इज अबाउट शोइंग अप एंड वेयरिंग व्हाट यू नो के टखनों से ऊपर शलवार होनी चाहिए और नमाज का ये तरीका है भाई मतलब ये बाहर दिखावे की चीजें नहीं है ठीक है उसका एक there is a culture and there is a ritual around things but those aren't more important than what's happening inside like do the inner work and I think you're right I think people understand because everything is commodified and people make money and everything is connected to money and we need money for survival we are sold the idea that our tension relief will come from spending money on doing something that will take care of us whereas actually I think the best techniques are free.
Like, sure, I mean, manicures are going to help. Spa days sometimes help when you're having a bad day. A piece of chocolate cake might help. But really, a lot of the times, you know, लोगों को इस यही एक notion है कि okay, self-love, selfish है. But a lot of people don't understand कि self-love में ना you have to unlearn your toxic behavior patterns. You have to set boundaries. You have to protect your energy at all costs. These are very important elements of self-love. जिस पे I think ज़्यादा बात नहीं होती कि boundary setting is very important. You cannot let people talk down to you or make you do things that you're not comfortable with. You have to set boundaries personally, professionally. You want to talk more on that?
No, I think you got it. I want to hear what you have to say.
I think my experience with stuff, I mean, no, but this interview is for you, not for me. But generally,
no, but I mean, listen, you know, you've reached out and you're doing this series and you're an interesting person. And I you know, I've been seeing some of the stuff you're posting. I'm curious because, you know, you've had a journey. So give me like 2 minutes so that we can get to know each other and then I'll come to
thank you. That's sweet,
yeah.
Adnan. No, so in my journey, what I've realized is that self-love, yes, sure, is being kind to yourself, but a lot of the times it's doing the internal work. I mean, you have to unlearn your own toxic behavior patterns. You have to know where exactly it is that you're talking down to yourself and get rid of that voice. A big part of self-love, and I always say this is like my standard quote, self-love without self-awareness leads to self-destruction. So when you're aware of who you really are, the compliments are not going to hit you to the point that it makes your ego soar, but also it will let you know, okay, इधर तो मैं हूँ. अगर मुझे कोई कहता है मैं ये सब नहीं हूँ, their opinion of me is not my reality.
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल.
So,
but I think it must have. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go on.
No, so I'm saying it must have taken you. It's not that's not an easy place to come to. So I mean, you must have had kind of your own kind of place where people must have hurt you a lot. So how did you build up the strength, and how did you build up that self-love and self-compassion?
I think, Anand, you know that voice note I sent you after one of your interview sessions? It's because I could relate and I could see a lot of my own journey in the way that you have been. Of course, I mean, it's very differently. My issues with self-love have been different. I went through a lot of body shaming. I went through a lot of fat shaming. And for me, like, it was a combination of working on my own self, like, of course, you know, losing the weight and things like that. But a big part of that happened mentally. I mean, for me, I didn't start losing weight until I was kind to myself and I learned to love myself. When that happened, I started seeing the positive changes. And I had to realize that people are always going to say things to you regardless of what you do. Like, they're never going to be satisfied. अगर चलो आपने weight कम कर लिया, फिर आपका रंग ऐसा है. फिर आप अगर आपका रंग सही है, तो आप में ये मसला है या वो मसला है. So you cannot let people dictate your life and your reality. That's where you have to set the boundaries, is how I feel. And you have to protect your energy at all costs. मतलब इतना अपने आप दूसरों पे इतना focus ना करो कि आप बिल्कुल डिप्लीट हो जाओ. You know, you have, when you are able to love yourself fully and you are able to focus on yourself fully, that's when you will be able to give fully to other people.
That's beautiful. I totally agree with you. I think it's in a lot of ways it's so much tougher for women, especially women from South Asia or even Muslim communities who kind of shift from the care of their parents or their father financially to their husband. And I often find that, especially a lot of young women really struggle with that because I think until they have their financial independence or relative financial independence, it's very difficult for them to kind of, because, a lot of people I talk to, a lot of young women, like, have these toxic relationships with their parents or with their family, and they're not necessarily toxic, they're just codependent and they're complicated. And some of it is because if you're in your late 20s or early 30s, and you're not married and you're not fully financially independent, which is difficult to do at that age, to be honest. I mean, to be fully financially independent and to live that lifestyle, it is, if you want to live a good lifestyle, it is tough. But what happens is that that's where most of the issues are. And then what ends up happening is that marriage becomes kind of this escape, I find often, but it's not necessarily done for the right reason. So I just think it's so, like, I'm interested in asking you, like, I find that such a difficult place to navigate for women, because you're right, set those boundaries, don't let your parents or your boyfriend or your husband ruin your energy. But also, when you need something from them, you are trained to be nice to get that thing, right? That's performance.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about that? Because I'm interested from what you think about women who are in their,
I respect you so much for the fact that, you're like an ally. You talk about these feminist issues because, yes, of course, there is a big element of feminism that comes in here. Wow, I feel like this has turned into my interview. But we're
no,
going to come
but
back
it
to
should
it.
be. It should be. It should be. That's what interviews should be. I mean, even when I do them, please. Yeah.
I think, फेमिनिज्म या ये जो बात आती है जेंडर रोल्स की हमारी सोसाइटी में अनफॉर्चुनेटली अब तक वी इन 2020 अब तक है कि अगर एक बेटा फॉर एग्जांपल अपनी बाउंड्रीज क्रिएट करना चाहेगा तो उसके लिए वो दैट्स नॉट अ वेरी डिफिकल्ट प्लेस टू नेविगेट क्योंकि लड़कों को तो होना ही चाहिए इंडिपेंडेंट उनको बाहर जाना है सोसाइटी में काम करना है तो they should be like that लेकिन oh no God forbid अगर लड़कियां start creating those boundaries for themselves या they start communicating that this is not okay with me somehow they're seen as ziddi they're seen as stubborn या खर दिमाग and things like that. So it is a difficult place to navigate because it takes a lot of patience on your end. It takes a lot of kindness on your end. ये भी नहीं हो सकता ना कि आप बिल्कुल गुस्से के साथ जाकर और बिल्कुल एक angry aggressive front के साथ you create boundaries because it never works. They won't last. It will just have the opposite effect. So it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of patience to set that tone, to change that pattern. Also, another thing I want to point out is you were saying something about toxic parents, or maybe the parents are not toxic. But I think it's important to recognize that our family can be toxic in certain scenarios, and that is okay. They've had trauma that they never got a chance to heal from.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that, if you check in the conversation I had with Sam, was about inherited trauma, and intergenerational trauma. So we inherit a lot. Our parents inherit a lot. And I love what Sam actually said, where she said, we're almost born with like a sixth finger, where the thing is we have this desire for the truth and we have this desire for understanding emotional truth, where maybe our parents weren't born with that. They weren't evolved to that point, and I think evolution is happening so quickly. And even if you look at the next generation of kids coming out, like even Gen Z is so interesting, right? Like, I mean, I think, I'm at the top end of being a millennial, but when I study like Gen Z, I don't know where you fit in, but Gen Z is, they're really interesting because they had to grow up in the 2000. Okay, but like Gen Z, when they had to grow up with the 2008, global recession, they didn't grow up like fully rich. They grew up with the internet around, but like the internet gave them a lot of empowerment. I mean, they're issue oriented, right? Like Gen Z is like black, like I think BLM really in a lot of ways. I think it's like the Gen Zs that really like pushed it because they really want people to take a stand. And like I find Gen Z is just a really interesting sort of group of young individuals, a generation around the world that is issue oriented, that is socially conscious, that will use capitalism as a tool to choose what they believe in. And so, if you look at them, they're so much more woke than we were in certain ways. And we are so much more woke than Gen X was, who is more woke than the baby boomers were. So, I think, like you were saying, कि वो trauma आता है, and then we have to stop it, especially with me and the next generation. We have to realize that some of the things that our parents don't know everything. And the problem is we grow up thinking they do know everything, and then they like that, and then they will keep telling you that they know better. And you know, in certain things they might not know better, but they don't want to be, you don't want to disrespect them. So you have to find a way to first prove it to yourself before you even prove it to them. When they see कि मेरा बच्चा खुद मुख्तार है, my child is able to stand up for themselves. It doesn't even have to be financial. It can be the way you interact. You know, like parents still love you. They just are protective and they're blind to it, and they go on autopilot. So I think when they see you taking the right stance, they see you doing something right, they hopefully most parents will acknowledge that, but it's tough for them because they're so caught up in their own trauma. Most parents are doing what I did, which is I probably inherited it, which is spending 70% or 80% of our days somewhere else. Like if you ask your parents about stories about partition, or you ask them about like what their life was like in the 70s, they'll tell you like this, because they're in their heads are there right now.
Yes. So this goes back to the question then about survival that I asked you. Do you think it's a privileged space? Because my parents jo the, unko survival was like the main focus. It wasn't about, okay, other issues. Like you said, you know, we're an issue-based generation. Hamare baad wali generation issue-based hai. But our parents had to focus on survival. Unke paas nahi time tha ki ye sochne ke liye ki, okay, mental health meri kya hai ya kya, because a lot of their mental health suffered. For them, it was, especially for immigrant parents. I'm born and raised in Dubai, for example. So immigrant parents had to really focus on surviving and providing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're right. I mean, I think it is that. I think that generation was also kind of growing up with capitalism, right? I think, you know, the 80s and the 90s really were the years where people realized कि पैसे बनाओ और बचाओ और खर्चो, and you know, before that money was just didn't have the same kind of importance, I think. And so they weren't, I guess they weren't lalchi, but they didn't have that many choices. They didn't think that much. They were like, यार काम करना है, पैसे कमाने हैं, बच्चे चाहिए, सेहत चाहिए, बच्चों को स्कूल पे जाना है, बच्चों की शादी हो जाए, हम बूढ़े हो जाएं, थोड़ा बैंक बैलेंस हो. But the thing is, we are more complicated, you know. So when they're like, yaar, tumhe masla kya hai, you know, and you're like, but this is who we are. We are sensitive. We do have a lot of choices. We are indecisive, you know. We are afraid of making decisions. And a lot of the reasons we're afraid of making decisions is because actually we saw our parents' failures at making those decisions and how regretful they are of the decisions that they made. And, you know, that impacts us. So we're afraid कि यार हमने गलती नहीं करनी. And then yet, you know, so it's like, I think that parent bond actually, you know, if you ask me really honestly, that's the work I did the most. I think self-love, apni development, and secondly, just really, and even though I have, mashallah, I have always had great parents, you know, and they were very supportive, very evolved in a lot of fronts, and in some fronts not so evolved, and that's okay. And I think just me kind of, you know, being able to not make them feel threatened, but make them feel secure, but still challenge their norms was probably one of the biggest things I've done in the last few years, because I think our family is much better for it.
This is precisely why I said I could relate to you a lot, because I think in that department, that's where I've had to challenge and direct most of the self-love as well. But Adnan, moving on to a different direction.
Ooh, okay.
You know, people look at you. Let's talk about looks a little bit, because of course you are in the media industry. Looks bahut matter, all of that. We're gonna come to body positivity and that. But when people look at you, they look at like a handsome, tall, you know, gentleman, and they don't think there could be self-esteem issues there. But I know you've said in the past that you've suffered from self-esteem issues. And you know, when I give workshops about self-love, you would be surprised. I mentioned this in the last session as well. I give these self-love talks in the UAE. And these seemingly perfect women, jo hame lagega ki ideal standard of beauty, European, long, thin, skinny, blonde hair, blue eyes. And they came up to me after the session and they said things where I was shocked. Because I was like, how could you have issues with self-love? How could you have self-esteem issues, you know? For us, you're perfect. So people, even if they might look perfect on the outside, of course, suffer from self-esteem issues. And I want you to talk a little bit about your struggle with self-esteem.
You know, I think everyone has some self-esteem issues, and I think it's natural. I just think, you know, because we live in such a visual culture now, there's this like extra onus put on people who kind of, especially with social media, you know. I mean, it's interesting, you know, when lockdown started, and then about a month into lockdown, I was like, I just want to shave my head. And I think a big part of it was I realized that like a big part of my look was my hair also, you know? And, you know, it's like literally I was like, okay, like I want to remove it. And, you know, and there I put it up on Instagram and I got a lot of interesting feedback. Because for so long, because in Satke and in whatever I've done this, and I used to model also, I got a lot of like focus based on my look, but it was the same thing that I felt sabotaged the development of my personality. Like I think when there's too much focus on the way one looks, then you're not developing the other parts of your personality. And I feel like, you know, my authentic self was never really represented, and my looks were so thin, like razor thin. Like I sometimes used to feel like being dependent on how you look like is like an abandoned beehive, you know, like it's so fragile. Like you look at it, it seems sturdy enough, you touch it and it's just like nothing. And I think, you know, I felt very, I mean, this is maybe the crux of it. I felt like my self-esteem issues and my self-love and all these things came from the fact that people thought I was good looking, but I didn't think I was good looking, right? But I had to I put on a front. I would try hard to be good looking so people would think I'm good looking. And now I've come to that point where I genuinely don't think I'm like, you know, I don't know. I just try not to value looks. It's really challenging because I'm so used to it. But even like you saw me earlier trying to fix the light, but it's also because I'm a director, but I see this like black shadow under my eye and I'm like, oh, and my beard, my face, and I'm just like, man, this is not the best version of me. But
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Again, if you read the comment section, it's making me crack up because so many
I
people have
can't,
been
it's
saying
stuck.
people have been saying things like I don't even want to repeat them. So I think you're more than okay
Please
in the looks
repeat
department.
them. Please repeat. I
There,
need
I
an
think
ego boost.
there's one consistent comment like, "Hey, sexy Adnan," and it just kept making me crack up. Not that it's not true, but just the way it's put forward so like directly. But no, I think
Oh.
you're more than okay in the looks department, Adnan.
No, no, thank you, and I appreciate that. And I think, you know, and I mean, I think that it's not seeking compliments. I just think, you know, it's a
No, of
reality. How
course.
we look has an effect on how people perceive us. And of course, that's a big part of it. But I've really been trying to move beyond that, and that's been part of the reason I shaved my head. Honestly, I don't know
I was
why I
gonna
did
ask
it.
you why.
I don't know. I just had this feeling. I fasted for the first time ever. Uh, the first month of COVID was just like magic for me. I was like, I was waiting for Ramzan to come because Ramzan, everything slows down in Pakistan. And I was feeling burnt out with all the advertising and all just my own kind of not settling. I was just kind of on the go, traveling around the world, doing what I could, you know, mashallah, doing well in my business as a director. And I was just tired. And I was like, oh, I can't wait till things slow down. And then COVID happened and I was like, oh, this is great. I get to slow down. So I was like, this is amazing. So then I got into basically I wrote on my whiteboard. I have a whiteboard and I wrote, feel the pain, don't distract from it. So I committed at this time. I was like, I am going to come out of COVID sorted on my emotional front because I've been this is just me. No, I mean, the COVID pressure thing is for everyone else. I was just like, dude, I have lived too long being unsure of myself and kind of chasing my own tail. And I know that where the issues are, I just need to be patient with myself and I need to do the daily work. And I need to just, so I, you know, writing a journal, meditating, saying my prayers, running, exercising, yoga, having the conversations with my sister, with my mom, with my dad, with my brother, you know, doing the things that I needed to do step by step every day. And, you know, and then one point it just came to me, it was like, shave your head. Because I was doing so many of these Zooms and I wouldn't know how to style my hair. It was getting annoying. It was like, and I was just like, F this, you know, and I literally one day just stood I went to YouTube and I was like, how to shave my head at home. And I just literally shaved it off and I just felt free, you know, but it definitely affected the way I looked at myself in the mirror. But then I found this amazing Deepak Chopra practice, which is mirror work, where you actually look in the mirror and you say things to yourself while looking directly into your eyes. So every time you look in the mirror, this is why I find these Zooms a little, or these, are we on Zoom or Insta Lives, where you're looking at yourself. I'm kind of trying not to look at myself. And every time I do
Yeah.
look at myself, to give myself certain affirmations. Like you said earlier, one of them, the first one is, when you look at yourself in the eyes in front of the mirror, as soon as you make eye contact with yourself, you're like, Nothing anyone says, positive or negative, has any effect on how I feel about myself.
Yeah.
When you say that. The second one is nobody. I am not better than anyone, and nobody is better than me. And the third one is I am fearless in the face of all challenges. And then you say Soham or Amin or whatever you want to say. And every time you look in the mirror, you say this stuff. Super powerful. It really,
It is really.
and it's some of the stuff you've been saying because it's an affirmation. Like if you imagine if every time you look at yourself, you say something positive. That's self-love. Rather than looking कि यार मेरी wrinkles आ रही हैं, मेरे बाल ऐसे हैं, मेरी दाढ़ी ऐसी है, मेरी shirt ऐसे लग रही है.
Bilkul. By the way, would you believe it if I told you that I wanted to shave my head this quarantine? I'm serious. I must have thought of this of at least 4 times.
Amazing.
I don't know why, but I had this strong urge to shave everything off. And I was like, nahi,
So
nahi,
strong.
nahi karo.
Who told you not? I mean, it's really tough, and I think for a woman, it's a lot tougher because your femininity gets questioned. But once in your life, to karna chahiye.
Seriously, mujhe itni strong. Adnan, don't say it. Don't say it because you're encouraging something I should probably not be doing. I will.
No, because think of the lessons, think of all the lessons that you're learning from. Everyone's going to have something to say about it, and you're going to have to stand up for yourself. You're going to look in the mirror and be like, why the hell did I do it 1 month into it? Then you're going to be like, oh, I don't have my. You're going to live with it, and those 6 months, you're going to learn so much. But there is some suffering, in growth, there is suffering. Like a caterpillar doesn't turn into a butterfly without some pain. So you have to face the pain. Like if you want to change, it's painful. I keep telling my friends or people who come to me who wants advice.
I will face the pain of my amma's chitter. That's what I will face the pain of. But
well,
sorry to cut you off. Something you said, because I think we're short on time, so I don't want to miss the session before, like I asked you these important questions, but something you said about that you wrote on your board this quarantine, something along the effects of feel to heal, don't run away from feeling what you feel. And that is so important, right? Because it goes back to working on yourself on your inner child. Because agar you run away from your feelings, then you avoid the inner trauma that's there, you avoid healing from it. So I want you to address the importance of kind of working on your inner child and feeling in order to heal.
I mean, I think I've been talking about it, but sure. I think you have to go through the pain, like to come out of it, you have to go through it. Like you can't circumvent it. Like if you want to come out of whatever your mental blocks are, whatever your self-limiting beliefs are, if you want to come out of every time you look in the mirror and are self-loathing or aren't fully happy, or if you want to come out of your depression or your anxiety or your fears about not being good enough or not being worthy or, whether you'll get a job or whether you find the right partner. I mean, the only way out of all these thoughts is to go through. And the way to go through is to often kind of see where these beliefs come from. And these beliefs come from a deep place within ourselves where we at some point told ourselves that we weren't these things. We weren't good enough. We weren't lovable. We'll never be able to do something. And some of that is not even our own voice. Some of that is the voice of our parents or like maybe something somebody once said and we just took it so personally. Because the thing is, at the end of the day, all kids are sensitive, right? So I think, with men, what happens is after a certain age, mard rota nahi hai, ladke nahi rote type thing. And so with men, we really suppress it quite early. So we're told not to be in touch at all with our inner child, who is ultimately sensitive. I mean, a child is sensitive. A child will cry. A child is really vulnerable. Yeah. So a lot of my reconnecting work has been that. It's to just kind of go back, see where these beliefs come from. Why do I think I'm a certain way? Whatever, my first thing to do is do the meditative work.
Sorry, we just have 28 minutes remaining and
28 minutes?
We had a longer session. 28 seconds. Sorry, seconds. Oh. 20 seconds remaining as we speak. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to wrap this up. This was so amazing. I honestly felt like I was catching up over coffee with a friend. I hope we can
Yeah,
do
it
it
was
again.
lovely. It was really lovely. We will, for sure. You're doing a
Thank
great
you,
job.
Adnan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.